Today is the end of your reign, evil warrior. Ah! I have triumphed! Ha 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 ha! Look at me! I have triumphed! No, I got better. I'm fine. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of How to Be a Great GM. The question we're asking today: minis. Should they be included in your game or not? Do we need to spend the vast sums of money that we could spend in order to include these in our games or not? And is it really worth it? Now, the more observant of you may have noticed some boxes behind me from Epic Encounters. They are today's sponsor, and normally the way sponsorships work on this channel is that people get hold of us, and if we have a time slot and their product is something that we want to talk about, we will then allow them to then do this promotion thing for a few seconds on the channel, and then we move on. Now, we always promote products that we ourselves would like or do use in our own games. And when they sent me miniatures, I went, I haven't used miniatures in one of my games for a long time. Well, not since I was in South Africa, which was literally now almost 5 years ago. But when I did used to use them, they were quite useful. And I kind of had forgotten that, having played so much online material. Anyway, they decided that they wanted to sponsor this particular episode. So big thank you to Epic Encounters. You can find links to our Amazon store. So if you want to support the channel, our Amazon store, which contains all of their Epic Encounter products. And I thought, it's time. It's time that we spoke about miniatures, especially considering how the miniature space has exploded all over the place in terms of 3D printing, but as well as in terms of models and the quality of those models, the accessibility of those models, and models now coming either painted or not painted. And it's a big space to get into. Now, the most important thing, and I will say this right now, financial safety before gaming, always. So these models, these miniatures are amazing, right? They're beautiful. And Epic Encounters, I think, has solved the balance between cost of model and quality of model. Is it worth it, though? That's the bottom line. And as far as I'm concerned, there are 3 reasons why miniatures makes your game better. And there are only 2 reasons why they make your game worse. So on the whole, it would seem to me that they make your game better. Now, the way that reason why I say that, let me unpack. So, firstly, why do they make your game worse? Let me handle that one. Firstly, they are a time delay. As a GM, you're going, okay, so here's a map. Let me draw a map. Or they could use something like Epic Battle Maps. Or if you're buying the Epic Encounters products, they all come with pre-built maps, pre-made maps, which, yes, you can use in your own game. So this is a volcanic caldera, I believe. And on the other side is a chamber leading up to it. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't read the adventure that's come with it. But nonetheless, you need to have a map. Because if you don't have a map, well, then your minis are basically worthless. So you have to prepare a map, and then you have to take time putting all of the figures onto that map. Okay, so there's a priest who's standing over here. And then, where is that model? Where's that miniature? I can't. Oh, yes. Okay. No, here we go. I found it, everybody. It's okay. Okay. So then you put it down here. And oh, no, wait. Hang on a moment. He's not here. No. He's over here. Do you see what's happening? The flow of your game has ground to a halt whilst you are looking for all of these super cool minis and things to include in your game. So minis do have that as a negative. And then, of course, the cost. The cost is always going to be a problem. It's always going to be a factor. But considering that we spend money on dice and we spend money on books, well, it's a hobby that you're getting into. Or you can learn how to print your own. Okay, so those are the 2 negatives that I can think of. And you are welcome to include more negatives down below. Please do. Absolutely. Go ahead. This is a discussion. Let's unpack this, right? The benefits, however, I think far outweigh those negatives, especially if you are prepared and have planned a little bit in advance. Now, when I say planned, I mean not in terms of your plot, but in terms of the way that you store your minis. I cringe and shudder when I look at someone's mini collection and it's in a box and everything is piled on top of everything, and you're like, how do you find the one kobold miniature that you're really wanting to use right now? Organization is the key to solving that one. The benefits. Let me get on to the benefits now before I wander around in all sorts of different directions. The benefits in terms of using miniatures in your game. The very first one, as far as I'm concerned, is reality. Now, our whole game is imaginary. We have our character sheets that represent these beings. We have dice that represent their abilities to do things, and fate, if you like. And occasionally we will have a battle map, which gives us some kind of location. But in terms of the character, in terms of seeing the character, oftentimes that goes amiss. So, for example, if you have your hero character and you say, right, here is my hero character, I can physically see that character in the round. I can look around and see that they're wearing greaves and they've got a backpack. Now, obviously, these things don't necessarily represent exactly the character that you're playing. Sometimes we're not that lucky, but generally speaking, I can see there is this character in plate mail and they're pretty damned intimidating because I can see them, I can visualize them far more than a description in my head. It also means that I can shorthand reference these as well, so that when we're busy playing the game, I can look down at the mini and go, oh yeah, that's your character. That's the mini. I remember that. Whereas if I'm just looking at the player, who may happen to be, let's say, someone who's incredibly thin with a very long hooked nose, and they've got some stubble, and yet they're meant to be playing Princess Leia, it's difficult to visualize sometimes, but if you can see the little figurine that represents them, that has the Christmas buns on either side of her head, you go, ah, yeah, that's Princess Leia. The other thing, the other reality that comes into play is when we start talking about scale. And again, let's use our 1T beast here. And you say, well, that's your character. That is the 1T who towers over you. And is quite intimidating in size. So we start to get to see the scale rather than to just try and imagine it. And then finally, of course, it drives the fact that when we have a particularly large scale, and I'm trying to balance this on my hands here for this demonstration, you can now see and realize, oh my goodness, this is a much more precarious situation than my imagination gave me credence for. I can also realize the size relationship of these two characters and so on and so forth. So the reality factor is a real component. It's a really strong component, which I really like. I really do like that factor. Another consideration when we are looking at our miniatures is that they do give us tactics. We have grids. We definitely have grids. Most maps have got a grid on them or a hex on them. Most role-playing systems have got a distance metric so we can figure out who's so far and etc, etc, etc. These are really important for us. For some games anyway, especially where the powers of the characters are to push someone away 5 feet or move them this way or move them that way. We can, of course, not use minis. We can use tokens. Absolutely. And Epic Encounters does come with some tokens, by the way, to sort of augment your collection. But again, tokens are flat and they are images. They are a step up from just putting a G and a circle around it on a hand-drawn map in terms of visualization. And in terms of tactics, they do serve the same function, I guess, and they are a lot cheaper. They're just not as tactile in terms of being able to physically pick up the miniature, look at it, and realize that it is a terrifying creature. Or not, as the case might be, if they are somebody, a peasant or something along those lines. So from a tactical perspective, there is a lot stronger desire for us to be able to see what's going on, but also to realize this is a much more complex situation than what's going on in my head. There is the negative, of course, that the players now turn this into a tactical war game, the original origins of Dungeons and Dragons, and that they step away from role-playing. So you as the GM have to focus them back into the role-playing space as well as the tactical space. But definitely the tactical, you can see your character, and you then can see the relationship to the other characters, and that's a really strong component. Finally, there is a sense of ownership. When you arrive at the table and you create your character, and then you get the mini that best represents it. Now, I remember I used to have a lot of figurines that I had gathered over time. And the most enjoyable moment was when my players were getting together. They had created their character and they were going, do you have a dwarf who's got like a double-handed axe and is riding on a Pegasus? And I'd go, well, no, but I do have a dwarf with an axe. And they'd go, that's the one. That's the one I want to play. I even remember I ran a game where my players were going to be playing goblins, and the session 0, the first part of session 0 was everyone got together at my place and we did a painting session where they painted their figurines to look like the characters that they were going to be playing. And it was, for some, very daunting. They were like, oh, I'm not a painter, I don't know how to paint. And for others, it was an enjoyable experience. I, of course, managed it in terms of giving them a paint by numbers kind of approach so that people could kind of get there. And then I touched up the figurines once they'd finished, as I have painted a lot of figurines in my life. Not well, but I have done it. It was a moment where those little figurines that they had forged and found and created, that became so powerful for them. That was theirs. They owned that. And years later, when you're using miniatures in another game and they see their character on the shelf, they go, oh, I remember so-and-so. Oh, it was such a great game. It was so much fun. I love that character and this and that and the next thing. And off they go. So there is that definite sense of ownership. Further to that, when you then start to put down maps, and every battle doesn't have to be a map and miniature, by the way, only the important battles where these things are critical. But when you put down a map and the PC can see their figurine, they can see the rift that they have to try and jump over, they are far more likely to try and find alternatives than just to leap over the gap. If it's in the imagination, there isn't that sense of scale, there isn't that sense of distance, and there isn't that sense of danger which the maps and the miniatures are giving to us. So there is as far as I'm concerned, those are the three really strong reasons why you would want to get in and bring miniatures into your game. Of course, as I said before, financial safety before gaming. You have to make sure that you're not going to be spending thousands and thousands of your local currency buying all of these figurines. Those are my thoughts on using miniatures in your game. What are your thoughts? What miniatures do you go to? I have to give a huge shout out, I really do, to Epic Encounters. Their miniatures, this is the collection that you get of their snake folk. So the 1T, and they come in different sizes. There's a really cool undead giant snake, which looks absolutely amazing. And they have just sent us, as you can see, a whole bunch of different options. This giant red dragon. Now, as I have looked around, their product is very well priced for what you get. Because not only do you get a miniature, so with the dragon, you get this dragon miniature. You also, as I said earlier, you get some cardboard tokens in case you don't have miniatures to supplement the adventure. You get a giant battle map, and you then get the encounter book, which I thought was quite a useful and different take on the whole thing. I know I'm spending a bit more time on this one, but this is a video about miniatures, and this is one of the ranges that they offer. Is it comes with statistics, it comes with an adventure, which makes use of the map and the minis, of course. And a whole story, which is, I have to say, a lot of fun, and it's a whole adventure. So that's quite a nice addition to these minis. You don't just get the minis, you're getting more to it. Now, of course, you can then paint them all as you so choose. What I suspect I'm going to do with these minis is I'm going to give them a wash. which is I'm going to use a dark wash paint, so it's not a thick paint. I'm going to wash over each of the figurines. That's going to give them a little bit more detailing. It's going to make the detailing a little bit more obvious, and that's it. So it's going to take me about 10 minutes to paint the entire set and have it looking so that it's got a bit of depth to it, but I'm going to keep them in their basic colors because I don't want to spend hours and hours and hours doing it. Player characters will get the full 3-hour, 4-hour painting treatment because arguably those are the ones that are going to be around for a long time. Anyway, until next time, a massive thank you to Epic Encounters for supplying us with these minis for this review, and to you for watching all the way through to the end. Until next week, I wish you and yours the very happiest of gaming.